I know golf fans are going to be all locked in on the U.S. Open, which begins Thursday at Torrey Pines. And who better to talk about that with than our man from Golf.Canada, PGA Tour Radio, the one and only Mark Zecchino. Z-Man, what's up? How are you? And are you ready for tee-off on Thursday?
I'm so pumped for this U.S. Open, but I got to be honest with you, like, I'm kind of in the mood right now to hit a patio and have a little brown jug after watching that. I'm like, can we drag the TV outside and watch the golf and have a couple of those?
Z, listen, if there's any way we could get you out to the Peg for a day, we'd have a bunch of little brown jugs on ice. We'd go out for a round at Breezy, check out the 19th hole and the amazing patio we've got out there. It would be a day right up your alley, my friend. Yeah. Have you been getting out much now that things are loosened a little bit out in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, finally got a couple of rounds of golf in. I went for dinner with my wife outside for the first time, so it's starting to feel a little normal. And we've got to figure that out. If we can't do it this summer, that might be something that we put on the board for next summer. A Golf Talk Canada visit to Winnipeg, and we can have some fun with you guys out there. That's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Winnipeg and Montreal are kind of like the two places I've been trying to get to. And it hasn't happened for obvious reasons, but I think next year we're all headed towards a better year. So,
well, for sure. And you know what? Montreal, we'll look forward to getting out there for the President's Cup. So in the meantime, we'll have our own massive event. It might not be international with the world's best golfers, but we'll have you there at least. Hey, you've got an albatross. To me, that puts you right up there with the greatest of all time. So that's where we're at. Z, before we get into because everyone is interested in your thoughts on who's looking good coming into the tournament, and people are ranking their brain about who they're picking in their golf pool or who they're going to make a bet on. Just if you could, give us a bit of a primer on the U.S. Open, what makes it the toughest test in golf, and what we know about the layout, the conditions of Torrey Pines this week awaiting the world's best.
I think the U.S. Open is likely the hardest test in golf because, it's obvious to point that it's the most difficult in the suggestion or the sense that even par usually has a pretty good chance to win the U.S. Open, where even par typically does not have a chance to win the other majors. That's kind of the simplistic way, I think, of putting out. But in my mind, it's more the test of how tough you are. Because when you put the ball in the ground in the U.S. Open, you've got to go right away with the understanding that this tournament isn't fair. You're going to have good shots that don't get rewarded, and you're going to have bad shots that go beyond getting penalized. They're going to get to the point where you probably want to run and hide, and you no longer want to be out there anymore. You better get comfortable with the opportunity that there are double bogeys lurking all over the place. The rough at Torrey Pines is unlike any other rough at U.S. Open venues. All U.S. Open venues have long rough. But Torrey Pines has this clumpy, nasty rough, 5 or 6 different types of grasses in the rough. You never get an even lie. You can have the golf ball sitting in one variety of grass, leaning against another variety, and you have no clue how or if it's going to come out. Mix that in with the third longest U.S. Open in history, marine layer in the mornings at Torrey Pines. This thing's going to play like an absolute beast. Bob and I were going back and forth, toying with what was going to be a winning score this week. He liked even par as a winning score. I like 2 under par as a winning score. But regardless, it's going to be something like that. You're not going to get an 8, 9, 10 under par champion. There's just no chance.
Z, looking at the odds for the event going in, I mean, it's some of the usual suspects, but it's interesting. There's sort of a group of players under 20-1. It's not a big group. There's 4 of them, and there's some of the biggest, strongest hitters on tour. Jon Rahm, the favorite, DJ, Bryson DeChambeau, and Brooks Koepka. Does it speak to some of the rough and just how physically strong you need to be to get and advance your ball in some situations to avoid the big number?
Yeah, very much. And I think it's natural for the Patriots money, the popular money, to land on the big bombers, as we say, because at first glance, to your point, you've got to hit a mile. It's big, it's nasty. You're going to have to power it out of the rough. But that being said, with the exception of Jon Rahm, I'm personally not on these guys this week. I think Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka are showing horrible form, just horrible form from this past week. So I don't really have a lot of faith in what they've been able to accomplish coming into this golf tournament. Rory McIlroy's kind of been very quiet, very lost in the wilderness. Dechambeau, I guess you could put some question marks on, but he's been quiet recently. Jon Rahm's the only one out of those favorites out of that group that I've kind of been all over. He loves this golf course. His performance at Torrey Pines in the Farmers Insurance Open every January is just impeccable. Obviously, you're a little concerned with the 10 days in quarantine from COVID, so he hasn't been able to practice as much as he'd like, but I think that put a chip on his shoulder. And Jon Rahm's already an emotional guy. The last thing you want is to give him another reason to want to beat you. So I really like Jon Rahm this week, but I think we might be surprised this week with the type of players that do well. And the reason I say that is I think it's going to be really hard to hit fairways at Torrey Pines. I think it's going to be a really difficult time hitting greens at Torrey Pines, which means it's going to come down to scrambling. I think guys who get up and down, great wedge play, scramble well around the greens might surprise people this week. So I'm kind of looking at guys more like, outside of Jon Rahm, I'm looking at guys like Jordan Spieth, Patrick Reed, I think, is a real sleeper this week. Xander Schauffele is a great bet this week. Wouldn't call him a sleeper, but that's a guy, San Diego native, that everybody's got their eye on. But yeah, the popular money's on the Bombers for obvious reasons. Let's see if they can find it, because they haven't had it recently. They're going to have to find it pretty quick. We only have a couple days left before this thing gets going.
Hey, Z, just before we move on from the guys at the top, listen, this Brooks-Bryson thing has kind of taken over a world of its own. And listen, for someone that is a big golf fan, but also likes the pop culture side of things, like, I'm here for all of it. It's been fun. But the dream, of course, is to have these guys paired up in the final round of something like the U.S. Open. And listen, they're both champions. Brooks has 2. Bryson's the defending champ. It's not out of the realm of possibility to imagine that happen. But just your thoughts on what's going on between those two guys. I mean, I know golf wants attention. Is this sort of the attention that they could do without? I mean, how are you feeling about that? And what is this whole riff? I mean, to me, this is like, Brooks is a weird dude. He almost needs to have something else more than just winning a major to be fighting people about. And I think Bryson maybe in this thing bit off a bit more than he can chew when it comes to the back and forth on social media. But it has become a little bit of a circus. And even when Brooks is even at the golf course, just thoughts on this whole thing going into Torrey.
I think you're right with Bryson in the sense that, he's an awkward guy at the best of times. So maybe biting a little bit more off than he wants. And I don't think he wanted this. I think he is an unwilling participant in this in terms of being dragged into this. Now, I love the friction. I love the rivalries. I think it's great for any sport, including golf. Having a little tension, having a little, I want to take you down. And not everybody's going to like everyone. That's just the way it is. And we kind of want to see these guys in a final pair, to your point. I think it would make for great TV. All that being said, the last week for me, it kind of crossed the line a bit. And it was Koepka to me that is the guy who has crossed the line here, not Dechambeau. Dechambeau's being prosecuted for being different. He's an awkward, weird guy that says weird things and plays the game differently. And it rubs Koepka the wrong way. And instead of keeping that in the locker room and keeping that to yourself, Koepka, in his typical arrogance, has chosen to air his dirty laundry in the public eye because he just doesn't care. He's that guy. And I think when you start handing out free beer with your sponsor to people that got kicked off a golf course for heckling your rival, I think that is crossing a line. And I'm also confused as why the brand, Michelob Ultra, the brand, why they would want to be associated with that. Like, why would they want to be associated with, hey, you got kicked out of a PGA Tour event for heckling a guy, here's a free case of beer? Like, that's a weird choice for a brand. Let's put it this way. Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, they're not making that choice as a brand. So Grey Goose, I'm sure, would not be making that choice as a brand. Weird to me that Michelob Ultra would want to make that choice. You could probably do a pretty interesting marketing conversation podcast based around that kind of activation we saw last week, for lack of a better term, on social media. But I'm with you. At the end of the day, I like to see this end between the ropes, one-on-one, and handle it that way, and shut up the other guy one way or another that way, than where we currently are.
You know, it's funny, even just looking at the chat as we're live right now, there is, a whole bunch of people. Everyone's got a take on Bryson or Brooks. They like one, they can't stand the other guy. Some people can't stand them both, which is, there's probably a lot of people in golf that can't stand them both, which somewhat makes it funny. But it certainly is a story going into this event. Does the focus on those two guys help a Dustin Johnson, a Jon Rahm at all? That, maybe at least starting off the tournament, everyone's wondering what these two guys are doing and what they're saying, as opposed to waiting to see what those guys are doing on Sunday afternoon on the back nine?
I gotta think so, especially out of the gates, right? Eventually, when we get to the weekend, that stuff's gonna fade out, and the stories that are going to be prominent in this championship are going to come to the surface, and people are not going to be able to avoid how they're playing, where they are in this tournament, their position, maybe mistakes they've made along the way, etc. But out of the gates, I think you're right. I think the big winner here is Rory McIlroy. I mean, when's the last time Rory McIlroy has been under the radar and unspoken of coming into a major championship? I mean, he is top of mind for most majors. And in recent years, the conversation has been, why haven't you won a major championship since 2014? When are you going to win a major? He is not on the tip of everyone's tongue this week. And that is different for Rory, and maybe going to be beneficial for Rory McIlroy, for all we know. Maybe he needs that. Maybe he doesn't need the spotlight right now. Maybe that's what he needs to get this thing back on track. I don't know. But I think you're probably in tune with something there, that there are several players that will benefit from the circus that is Dechambeau and Koepka if it continues. In my mind, Rory leaps to the top of that mountain.
Now, we've talked about some guys that a lot of people don't like. A guy that used to have a lot of people that didn't like him, that now absolutely everybody loves, is the defending Wanamaker Trophy champion, Phil Mickelson. I still can't believe that it happened. Maybe just a word on that. And could we have lightning strike twice? I mean, Phil's certainly no stranger to Torrey Pines.
No, he's no stranger. He's a local. I think, obviously trying to win back-to-back majors, and he's going to be 51 this week. This is a huge ask.
Nuts.
It's a huge ask, but you're right. He's got the people's support. It's the people's champion, Phil Mickelson. And the one thing he does have going for him at age 51, he still has one of the best short games in the world. Inside 100 yards, he is arguably still the best player on the planet inside 100 yards. So if you buy into the narrative, and there is a narrative out there that Torrey Pines is so difficult that everyone's going to be missing greens, that everyone's going to be missing fairways, that you can't go out there and hit 15 greens in regulation and plot your way around Torrey Pines, it will beat you up and slap you around. So if that's the narrative, then it becomes a scrambling contest, which is the reason why I like Jordan Spieth and Patrick Reed so much this week, because I believe it is going to be a scrambling contest. But if you believe you like Jordan Spieth and Patrick Reed, then there is no reason you don't like Phil Mickelson. Remove the age, forget the fact that he's 51, and look at his performance at the PGA Championship and look at where his strengths are inside 100 yards. If you look at that and remove the fact that he's 51 years old, and then you think this is a scrambling golf tournament, there's no reason you shouldn't like Phil Mickelson.
The only way I think he could top his win at the PGA would be to do it here this weekend at the US Open. But I mean, Z, you've been involved in this game for a long time. Just quickly before we move on from Phil, I mean, where did his win at the PGA rank among some of the greatest, most important victories in golf history?
It's epic. To win a major at that age, become the first, the oldest player in history to win a major. And, some people have him, 7th, 8th best all time. I have him 10th, the 10th greatest of all time on my list. Everyone has him inside the top 15. I will say this, if he were to do this week, it is likely the biggest story in the history of the sport. I don't think anything would even come close if he were able to finally get the US Open, to do it at 51, to be one of, 6 players in history to have a career Grand Slam. I mean, he would go to a new level. He would go to a level that only a handful of players in history have ever reached. That's how big this would be this week for Phil Mickelson.
Z, got to ask you about the Canadians. And, I'm looking, Corey Connors, no surprise. I mean, when you're looking at numbers on top Canadian, he's a clear favorite. Mm-hmm. You got Adam Hadwin at 4-1, Mac Hughes at 5-1. But an interesting name that a lot of people, casual PGA fans, might not know is Taylor Pendrith. And Taylor Pendrith was 7. I've heard a lot of people talking about him when it comes to this prop. He's now at plus 550. Tell us a bit more about Pendrith. I mean, he has played very well on the Korn Ferry Tour, consistently contending, and by all accounts is one of the guys that can beat the hell out of the golf ball and send it as far as most in the game.
It wouldn't surprise me if he was low Canadian this week. And that's with all due respect to all 4 of our guys. But, Taylor Pendrith was low Canadian at the last year's U.S. Open. He's qualified now for back-to-back. He is definitely the longest of the group. And I also think he's playing with a little bit of house money. He's about to, make the graduation from the Korn Ferry Tour to the PGA Tour for next season. We already know that's coming. So to me, this is all kind of gravy right now. And he's always been super gifted and super talented, but it took a little maturing off the golf course for Taylor Pendrith, which has finally come around. So I really have big expectations for him on the PGA Tour next year. So it would not surprise me if he was our low Canadian. As far as Corey Connors goes, I mean, it's so simple for Corey Connors. He is the best male Canadian on the planet right now. Corey Connors needs to figure out how to shoot a good score on that one round, because he's going to have one round in 4 where he isn't going to hit 14 or 15 greens. It's not going to happen in major championship golf. There is going to be a day he goes out there and hits 9, 10, 11 greens. Can he post a score on the day he does that? If he can, watch out, because this guy's an incredible ball striker. That's been the missing piece for him. We saw it at the PGA Championship when he opened up with that great round and led the tournament. And then his ball striking left him for about 27 holes. And when his ball striking left him for 18 to 27 holes, give or take, he couldn't find a way to put a score on the board because the wedge game wasn't there. That's pretty much all he's been working on right now are his wedges. If the wedges have improved, that's going to help him huge this week.
Mark Zecchino, Golf Talk Canada, PGA Tour Radio with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Z, just finally on the way out, the biggest decisions, everyone's going to pick the guy they like or 2, but if you're filling out a golf pool or a DraftKings lineup, you need a few low-dollar ballers. Some of the guys a little ways down that, don't necessarily have to win the tournament, but you certainly want them to make the cut. You'd love for them to be in the mix for a top 10, a top 20. Is there a golfer or 2 that's sort of off the radar that you think, their game suits well to, maybe overachieve as far as the expectations at Torrey Pines?
Yeah, I'll give you 2, and they're both Australian. I'd say watch out for Cameron Smith. He's had a quiet, very good year, and look at his major championship finishes. This guy plays really well in big events and is comfortable at Torrey Pines as well. Has a win this year, and with his partner at the Zurich Classic for New Orleans, Mark Leishman. Leishman hasn't done much lately, but he's won at the Farmers Insurance Open before just a couple of years ago, comfortable on the golf course. I think those 2 Australians could have a lot of value and surprise some people this week. And maybe Garrick Higgo. Look at what he did last week at the Palmetto Championship. Garrick Higgo has won 4 times in 9 months, 3 on the European Tour and now on the PGA Tour. Does Garrick Higgo go out and win the U.S. Open? Not a chance. But for him, he's proven he can play well anywhere he goes. So why not Garrick Higgo? The guy's riding high. He's starting to believe in himself. And who knows, Garrick Higgo might surprise some people this week again as well.
I love that. I did put a little sprinkle on Cam Smith to be top rest of the world of the non-Americans and Europeans. And man, you look at the top of that list. I mean, you'd have to go all the way down to Hideki, who I think is 49-1 for the first non-American or European in the mix. And Higgo's interesting. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, the thought of him being in the mix at the numbers, we would have never seen it. But I mean, you sort of laid it out. I mean, all the guy's done is won overseas, and he comes over here. What was this, his second PGA Tour start, and he's got a trophy?
Yeah, I think what happened with, I don't want to call it the disrespect, but why he was flying under everyone's radar so much is because of travel restrictions in the world. the European Tour has been a watered down version of what it normally is, because most of the best European Tour players in the world have not been really playing the European Tour during this pandemic. Most of them have been on this side of the pond, playing the PGA Tour, getting ready for majors, World Golf Championships, and not dealing with the travel, the quarantines, the different rules of going back and forth. So the European Tour has been a watered down version of itself. So when Garrett Higo has 3 wins on that tour, I don't think it garnered a bunch of respect or attention. And I think we were wrong, obviously. I think maybe it's a stronger tour than we give it credit for, even when the big names are over here. And I think his win last week at the Palmetto Championship with, Dustin Johnson in the field, Brooks Koepka in the field, Tyrrell Hatton finishing second, I think that win gives a lot of credibility to those 3 other wins that we overlooked previously.
Z, this was so awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Cannot wait for the tournament. We'll look forward to you and Bob with all the great coverage you've got coming up on TSN, and hopefully we can catch up later on this season. Enjoy the U.S. Open, my friend.
100%. Love it. 13 hours of coverage on Thursday, so watch the bed sores.
Well, and we'll have that cold little brown jug and a tea time waiting for you the next time you can make it up to Southern Manitoba, pal.
Awesome.
There he is, Mark Zecchino. Give him a follow on Twitter if you aren't already, at Z-Man Golf. And the boys at TSN are going to be ready to go at 13 hours of live coverage. It's going to be incredible. This is the best test in golf.